Hi everyone, I'm Sandy. Welcome back to my channel. That was weird. Something just drove by that was really loud. Today I have my December reading wrap up for you, where I'm just going to go through the books that I ended up reading in December, talk about the ones I haven't talked about yet, and then also give you a little bit of stats on how my 1001 reading project actually ended up in December. Because I know I finished my countdown with 51 out of 52, but the other books that I ended up reading off of the countdown is actually interesting. So I thought I would share that with you as well. So it was ultimately a pretty decent reading month. I read several books off of the 1001 book countdown. I ended up reading Zorba the Greek, which was a very different kind of novel, but I did finish this one. I've already talked about it in a video. I also read Regeneration by Pat Barker. And I did a live show with Margaret Pinard for this book, which was a lot of fun. I do have to go on and read, this is the first book in a trilogy, and I do have to go on and read the second and the third book, because the third book is also on the 1001 book countdown. So I do need to read the rest of them. I just don't know when that will be. But this was a really great read with Margaret, and I will leave a link to the live show down below for you if you want to go and watch our discussion about this particular book. And then the last book that I finished from the 1001 book countdown that was on my TBR was, of course, the Brothers Karamazov, which was my 1001 book club pick for December. And this particular book took me way longer to finish than I thought it would. I ended up having to put it down at various points. So it was a bit of a struggle. I will be reading Crime and Punishment this year in April. So we'll see how that one goes. It'll be my second Dostoyevsky. And this one was a lot to tackle for the first book by this particular author. I do think it's one that I will end up rereading at some point, but I have also already talked about this one in my last countdown video. So yeah, the Brothers Karamazov I did finish. The one book that I didn't finish from the 52 list was Tirant, Blanc. I didn't pull it off my shelf today because I already talked about it. I just couldn't get to that one. I did actually end up picking up one that wasn't on my 1001, my 52 list, which was Kiss of the Spider Woman, which I've also already talked about. That was great that I was able to pick up that play, and it was very short as well, and it was a lot of fun to be able to pick that one up for, again, the World Cup Reading Challenge that I participated in with Mark over at Book Time with Elvis. So that was great that I was able to do that and pick up that one. So overall, off of the 52 list, I completed 51 of 52, but I actually ended up reading 55 books off of the list this year, which is incredible. So 3 more than I really had hoped to do, but it will still take me a number of years to finish this project at that pace. And so I'm trying to decide what I want to do in regards to that. So overall, I ended up reading 128 books, and so 55, 73 other books that were not on the countdown. And I really do like that mix of books. I like having new releases. I like having nonfiction. I like having unexpected reads in there. And so I don't know how to kind of balance the two desires that I have. But that's kind of the overall 1001 books that I did manage to finish in December. And in January so far, I haven't finished a single one. So we're just starting off the year with a bang. As far as the other reads that I had on my TBR, my nonfiction book pick was A Movable Feast by Ernest Hemingway. And I was able to finish this book, finally able to finish this book. I had the audiobook, which I would listen to and read this kind of all at the same time. And the audiobook actually had more chapters in it than this one did, which I thought was really interesting. Slightly different order of chapters, slightly different, kind of how the story was told, which I thought was really fascinating, that there are obviously different versions of this. So this really documents or talks about Ernest Hemingway's time in Paris in the 1920s and all of the people, the fabulous, wonderful people that he meets in Paris and around Paris, and all of those characters. Having read some other books about this time frame, like Gertrude Stein's books, it was interesting to compare the two perspectives. It didn't charm me the way I really wanted it to charm me. I wanted it to be maybe something a little bit different, but I finally finished A Movable Feast, and I am thrilled. I am so glad that this is finally off of my shelf and read, and I can put away. It was one of my TBR veterans on my shelf. I believe I got this as a gift a number of years ago. ago. So I'm thrilled that it is actually off my shelf, even if I wasn't like super in love with this book. So A Movable Feast, that was my nonfiction read. My new release pick was The Night Ship by Jess Kidd. I bought this as a cover buy because this cover is gorgeous. I think it's absolutely beautiful, and I love the idea of a ship. It's a 2022 new release, which I don't read a ton of new releases. So this book has two different timelines. One is in the 1600s and one is in the 1900s. The exact year is escaping me, which is why I haven't said it. And it is told from the perspective of actually two children. There's a young girl in the 1600s and a young boy in the 1900s, and I really loved being in their heads. And the girl on the ship, she goes through a lot, and the boy that's on this island, it's connected by the ship because they believe that the ship crashed at that island. And so you kind of are there's a couple of sites on the island that they're going through and trying to archaeological sites, or trying to figure out what happened, and then you're getting what happened from the girl's perspective that was on the ship. And so it can be pretty dark in places, this book, and there's some weird character in there as well, which almost makes it seem mystical, and a couple of times where the boy and the girl were connected in a way that I didn't expect, which made it be a little bit more fantastical or mystical as well. So, but The Night Ship by Jess Kidd was my new release, and I was able to actually finish it, so I was very happy about that. In addition to that, I had, for the World Cup Reading Challenge that was hosted by Mark over at Book Time with Elvis, I originally had Australia as the country, and I was supposed to read The Yield by Tara June Winch, and I didn't get to it. I don't know why. I just didn't pick this one up. It just didn't happen. I think it's one of the very few casualties on my actual TBR in December. It's not that I don't want to read it. I just, for whatever reason, just ran out of energy and time for reading this and picked up some other things instead. So yeah, The Yield sadly is going back on the shelf, so hopefully I'll get to it at some point. And then for my workbook club, we read Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo, and then I immediately went out and read Crooked Kingdom as well, which is the second book in the duology. This book I had a lot of fun reading. It is a YA fantasy type of a book, which I do not read a lot of. I'm not usually a huge fan of YA because it often comes across as teenage angsty, and that's not my favorite thing to read. So this one actually has 6 really interesting characters who have a found family amongst these kind of young gang in this town that they live in. And so they have this epic kind of, not quest, but thing that they want to go do. I don't want to give spoilers. And it is all about their interactions and how they relate to each other. And it was so much fun to read, but they were often in peril, these characters. It's like I had to keep reading because I had to find out, is everybody okay? And I really did like a number of the characters in here, and it didn't give me kind of those teenage angsty vibes. I did understand this Netflix sticker. The Netflix adaptation is actually a combination of this one and the Shadow of Bone trilogy, which I have not read yet. So, but the Six of Crows one, I was in my book postscript tag as well, because I do think it would appeal to a wide audience. And I did like Six of Crows more than I liked Crooked Kingdom, by the way. But I did really enjoy Six of Crows, surprisingly so. I didn't think I'd like it as much as I did. All right, the last book that was on my TBR was Streets of Laredo by Larry McMurtry. This is the second book in the Lonesome Dove quartet, and I read this as a buddy read with Jack over at Spread Book Joy, and we did read this in December. It was a little slow going. We were both busy around the holidays, and then when you get to a certain point in this book, it's like, okay, I have to keep reading it and want to find out what happens, as much as what happened in Lonesome Dove. Lonesome Dove was a 5-star read for me. My favorite book, one of my favorite books in 2022. I want to reread that book. I love the characters in that book. It was so much of me that I just love. There's so much in that book that I loved. I've recommended it to people. So this book had a lot to live up to with Lonesome Dove, and it didn't quite get there. It's still a 4-star read, but it's not the 5-star read. Jack and I had a great discussion trying to figure out why that is. And in some cases, we don't get to know all all of the characters the same way we got to know them in Lonesome Dove. And in Lonesome Dove, there were some amazing characters that I just fell in love with and wanted to be with them more in the story. And in this one, we didn't have as much of that, or the characters who had that potential weren't in the story that much. And that was really tough with this one because they spent a lot of time with a particular character and her life and her children, and not enough with some of the other characters that were really, really interesting. There were also a couple characters in this one that was like, okay, well, why are you there in this one? The other thing that this one was lacking compared to like Lonesome Dove had a lot of descriptions about the environment and the bugs and the heat and the sand and all of those pieces. And this one didn't quite get there. It does do it a little bit with the cold, but not to the same level. And there are definitely despicable characters that you're rooting against in this book, a couple of them, which made it really interesting. And the ending was one where I had to figure out what was going on. Would I recommend you keep reading it? Not necessarily. I think it was good, wasn't great. Read Lonesome Dove. If you don't get to this one, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Jack and I are going to try and read the next book in the series, but I don't have any idea of when. But Streets of Laredo. I wanted to love you like I loved Lonesome Dove, and I didn't quite. This book actually follows the characters after Lonesome Dove, where the third book is a prequel to Lonesome Dove. So I'm hopeful. I am hopeful that one is good. Someone had left a message in my comments, a comment saying that book wasn't very good. So I don't know. We'll see. But Streets of Laredo ended up being a 4-star read for me. We do get some of the same characters from Lonesome Dove, but not all of them. Well, not all of them. I won't spoil Lonesome Dove for you, but it always is fun reading with Jack, even though we didn't chuck in as much on this one as we have on others in the past, but Streets of Laredo. And then the other book that I ended up picking up was actually the first book in the Heartstopper Quartet. I think it's a quartet, which is a graphic novel, and that one was such an easy, short read, and I really did like it. It was a good breakup from the Brothers Karamazov, which I definitely needed at times. So I don't have a lot of details about that particular one. I did read it a while ago, and it was a library book, so I don't have it anymore. I actually saw it at the library just by chance and picked it up and thought, why not? But I did like it quite a bit. It was an interesting read, but short, and I'm not a huge graphic novel person. So for me, that's saying quite a bit that I liked it that much. The other book that I tried to read, I actually have a DNF. I don't DNF books very often, but the book is called, I believe, Love on the Brain. And I started reading this one as kind of a palate cleanser after reading the Brothers Karamazov, or while reading the Brothers Karamazov, because sometimes when I'm feeling a little slumpy, I'll go read something romancy and it will pull me out of the slump. And I started this book. It's a library book again, which I don't have now because I've taken it back to the library. And the thing is that I was immediately turned off by the language, because at the very beginning, the character is describing something and the author chooses to put in there something like womp womp as a line in the text, and I don't know why that just didn't sit well with me. And then as I continued, it was feeling very obvious kind of what was going to happen and what the plot line was of the story, and I just said, I don't want to. I have enough books that I kind of have to make my way through, and this one was not one of them. So I immediately DNF'd it and said, I think I'm good for now. Yeah, it's a surprise though, because usually I love romance, even cheesy romance. And this one just didn't work for me. So that was one book that I ended up DNFing. A very surprising DNF. I do not DNF books very often. It has to be something that just is seriously not working for me. I think I've only DNF'd maybe 2 books, one being Dr. Faustus, and then this one this year. I have DNF'd a couple of other ones, but it's been a while. So yeah, interesting. Very interesting that one didn't work for me. So overall, I think I only had 2 books I didn't read off of my TBR, which is amazing. And I had picked up a couple of books that I wasn't planning on reading. So overall, again, I'm going to consider it a big success and a big mix. A Western, a new release, a nonfiction, the 1001 books. I really love how eclectic my reading has become since really joining BookTube as well. So that has been amazing. But I think that is it. I'm looking around my office like there's something else going on. I don't know. But as always, like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, everyone, thanks. Bye.